of all, welcome to everybody. Exciting to have our first event of the year. And welcome to Umran Beba and Aylin Uysal. And thanks for both of you for attending, hosting, and speaking for this event. Just a couple of words about TUSIAD, which we traditionally do at the kickoff anything. TUSIAD is the foremost influential business organization of Turkey with over 600 members based in Istanbul. And we over here are the TUSIAD Silicon Valley Network. We were formed a couple of years back, and our network, or members, we should call it, are made up of entrepreneurs as well as professionals in the Bay Area, San Francisco, and the larger Silicon Valley at large. Our intention is to continue these events. Hopefully we'll move on to face-to-face as the pandemic gets better, like we used to do 2 years back. But for the moment, we're continuing these events online is our intent. The purpose of TUSIAD Silicon Valley is twofold. First, of course, is to form a networking platform for business people to get to know each other, support each other, and do business together. And secondarily, but most importantly, to build a strong bridge between the Silicon Valley and Istanbul and Turkey at large, and support the business community back out there, and vice versa for the entrepreneurs and the professionals out here. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over the word to Aylin Uysal, who's a vice president at Oracle Company for UX, and she's going to be our moderator for the day to introduce our distinguished speaker, Imran Beba. Aylin, over to you. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Ayşegül. Çok teşekkürler. Merhaba. Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar, Advancing Gender Diversity and Equality in the Boardroom with Umran Beba. I'm super honored to have her at this event. I'm the head of design, as Ayşegül said, for the Oracle HCM cloud product at Oracle, HCM Human Capital Management. So being in this HR space and being in this design space, this topic is close to my heart. And some logistics before we start. We kept this event intentionally small. As you can see, we are a small group of people. And as you notice, we can't see you, and that's really nice too. It's always nice to see the audience while you are presenting virtually as well. After Imran Beba presents her topic and after her presentation, we will open up the questions. Please raise your hand and speak up. It's going to be pretty welcoming environment. And of course, you can also post your questions to the chat. And first of all, I would like to thank you again to Imran Beba for joining us today. And I'm sure many of you might already know her, but I wanted to give a quick overview about her amazing career. So Imran Beba has been named as one of the greatest living business minds of Turkey by Forbes magazine, and also featured in Fortune magazine for 3 years. In 3 years. So, and she has been in the global list of ranking, global list, and received numerous awards in rankings for being inspirational leaders and mentor and diversity advocate. She has been featured in 4 books about her leadership, diversity, talent advocacy. She's an experienced senior business executive with general management, talent, and diversity background. Close to 35 years of experience in consumer goods industry, where 25 years was with PepsiCo in different locations, namely Istanbul, Hong Kong, Dubai, and New York. She was the Asia Pacific president of PepsiCo, following president and general management roles in Southeast Europe, East Mediterranean, Middle East, and Turkey. She has been in chief HR officer and chief diversity officer roles in her career, managed several transformation projects, as well as executive recruitment, talent pipeline building, culture shaping, mentoring, coaching, diversity and inclusion agenda setting, and execution and human capital management initiatives. And of course, she has served in many boards. She has recently joined Bakkavor Group PLC Board of Directors as independent non-executive board director. She has been an independent non-executive board director for 5 years in Japan, Kalbi Snacks public company in Tokyo, and currently in the board of International Youth Foundation as a co-chair of the board and Neighbors Link as a board member. She's a trustee of Purchase College Foundation board and has a board of overseers role in Columbia University School of Professional Studies. She has been in the Future Council Committee of World Economic Forum for the last 8 years. And at the times that sustainability was so crucial for our planet, Imran Baba has been a great supporter of all of PepsiCo's performance with purpose goals and has led the development or expansion of numerous sustainability programs designed to achieve them. These include Water Hope, a collaborative social enterprise that aims to bring clean drinking water to over 1 million Filipinos. Leader of Light, bringing clean energy to poor communities across Asia, Africa, and South America, and a partnership with UNESCO to build a business skills development center in Myanmar. She's a native of Turkey and earned her MBA and Bachelor's of Science in Industrial Engineering from Boğaziçi University in Istanbul. She lives in Greenwich, Connecticut with her family. I'm like, wow, such an amazing career, and we are very much honored to have you here. So before, passing to Imran Beba, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the diversity. As we know that data shows that diversity in the boardroom is good for business. A diverse boardroom provides a diversity of thought, fosters innovation, leads to a higher decision-making. And a diverse boardroom helps address complex corporate issues, reduce operational risks. It's also more representative of any company's shareholders. We have a diverse shareholders. A diverse boardroom and allows to better financial results on many key metrics, increases revenues. And what we are noticing, more and more women are increasingly interested in working in the boards as independent directors. And to move the needle faster, California became the first state to require diversity on corporate boards, starting with women, followed by unrepresented populations. A law that took effect in 2019 requires the boards of all California-based publicly held companies to have at least 1 female director by the end of that year and 3 by the end of 2021. So we are in 2022, right? So we are definitely, we are seeing more and more women in the boardroom. And following California, the state of Washington passed a law effective June 2020, requiring corporate boards to be at least 25% female. Other states, including like Massachusetts, New Jersey, have considered mandating board diversity. And of course, we know countries like including Iceland, Israel, Norway, Italy, France, Belgium, Finland have quotas for female directors that range from 33% to 50%. And today in the audience, we are many of us, I mean, all of us like Turkish American women, and of course, American women and Turkish women, different level in our career. We are actually representing a diverse profile ourselves. And I am actually eager to hear Imran, your perspective and learn from you with all these things are happening and the things are changing and shifting. What is next and what we could do ourselves on our career to be in that room.
Great, thank you. I think we have some polling to do, right?
Yeah,
before I speak, so we'll wait for
Eldon,
that.
can you please bring up the poll?
Okay, you should be able to see it now under the polls tab.
So we all go to the polls tab. Okay, great.
Alden, it didn't work for me. I don't know how it's for others, but
Because we
Yeah.
are maybe hosts, right? Because we are
maybe
hosts, we
hopefully
can't
the others
answer.
are answering the questions. Yeah, all right. Yeah, I'm seeing now.
Mhm.
But you can see the results, right?
Yes, we
Yes,
do.
we are seeing the results. Yeah.
That's the reason, is because you're a host.
So we are waiting maybe for another minute just to see
Yeah.
I mean, it's like 50-50 at this point.
Yeah, yeah. And it seems
So,
like everybody almost interested in the advisory board.
they are serving
And we do
startup
have
advisory.
people serving in the board.
Mhm, mhm. Great. Okay, we can actually call in some of the participants during the presentation and the conversation. I mean, normally you are used to maybe more webinars, but today we really wanted to have a conversation dialogue about this topic, and thank you for joining. It's a very important topic, and we really want to start this journey early. And I didn't have chance to see this kind of a conversation when I was, let's say, younger in my career. So I hope this is going to be helpful for different audiences. With that, I will just put my presentation on the screen. And I also want to thank, of course, Ayşegül, who invited me, Aylin moderating here, and Alden helping. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Um, I think at this point, being in the US, I was exposed. I will talk at the end, actually, my personal journey, but I was exposed to a lot of different opportunities in the US more than other places. So what I want to say is basically we are in a good place to have these opportunities. So that's a positive. But before diving into my personal journey, I just want to give a sense of actually what are the different board opportunities that might come to your attention or you might be interested, and what are the expectations, um, and also maybe some of the obligations, let's call it. So I try to summarize here based on my experience types of boards, advisory boards, nonprofit boards, educational institutions and their boards, public for-profit, which is of course the most known and discussed topic recently based on the diversity remits, private for-profit boards, and startup boards. So given the nature of the audience here, definitely startup boards might be something very close to your heart. Either you are a founder and maybe you have your own board, or you might be invited, given the nature of the location also, you might have some of those opportunities. So if I start with advisory boards, I have seen a couple of you actually are serving already in advisory boards, and that's mainly because you have the expertise in the area for a new startup or for a mission organization. The range can be really wide here, and you will see different aspects of your expertise being deeply needed. Normally, there is no pay in the beginning, but if they are going with an IPO, if it's a startup, if there's an IPO, then you might get equity in the original advisory board agreement when you sign it. If it is a regular for-profit organization, I think you definitely build a good network. I think you become more visible for future public boards. If it's a mission organization, again, I think network building is for sure, but also you learn how to deal with a mission, I mean, fundraising becomes a critical part of it. Um, and my experience, there is not a lot of pre-reading in this type of boards, but you have to just go there, hear about the problem, and you are expected to offer some expertise and solutions. So at this point, I just want to call in one or two of you who are already serving in advisory boards, and let's hear from you. What are your experiences and observations if you are willing to do so? A couple of you actually answered that you serve in an advisory board. So I'm trying to be interactive here, but let's see. If we don't get a response, I will continue.
Okay, I think we need to unmute someone
Oh,
and
I
ask.
see.
We
Yeah,
asked to
yeah.
unmute. Yeah.
Is it possible, Alden, to do that?
Yes, it should be, although I think people should already have that ability. And so
Okay.
you're trying to
Okay.
unmute and you can't.
I noticed Sinan asked to be unmuted, but
Perfect.
Uh-huh.
maybe.
We'll do that.
Yeah, if possible, let's unmute everybody so they can jump in, if you have such questions. But is there anybody who would like to talk about advisory boards, give an example from their day-to-day, life?
So I've
Okay.
requested to unmute
Yes.
and it doesn't seem to be going through.
Okay, then let me continue while you are maybe dealing with that because you might need some time.
So one question on that, I'm not in the advisory
Sure.
board, but do you
Yeah.
see the advisory board, like if you talk about it a little bit on that, like as a start, like if I've never been in a board before, like is that a good way to start? And can
Exactly.
you open up a little bit on that?
Yes, yes. Advisory boards are really good because you are not going into the deep requirements of actually obligations of like public boards. So
Mhm.
basically, they want you in their journey. These are most of the time either small organizations or startups, and they need your network. They need your expertise. They call you in, and as I said, I mean, like a couple of pages of an agreement you normally sign. Um, and then when there are meetings like every month or every 2 months, you just show up, and before the meeting, sometimes there is an agenda. But there is not a lot of reading or deciding or signing, those obligations. But what happens then, I think, you build an experience outside of your regular scope. If you are working in a company or if you are having another job, this will be an additional area where also you build some experience and expertise, which will be useful for future, more serious governed
Mhm.
boards, actually.
I,
So,
if I may, I thought about it, Imran, and
yes,
nobody else have contributed. I said, let me take a moment to let
sure.
others speak. But um, my first advisory experience, if I can share it for 2 minutes, was on an
Yes.
insurance company. And I always, all my life, I worked in technology companies, and it was so interesting, out of this world. And they wanted me to be there to bring the experience from Silicon Valley, where else the world is going. And it was amazing because I was the only technologist in the room. And to give them that perspective as to these constant breakthrough insurance companies who were startups at the time, now they're hundreds of them, and they're billion-dollar startup ecosystem in the insurance business. At the time, this is probably like 6 or 8 years ago, it was unheard of. So it was very interesting to hear their 100-year-old experience and me living in Silicon Valley. And I'm like, okay, well, we can totally think about it differently. It was such a different interaction between me and the rest of the board and the CEO, was something that just blew me away to observe that.
Yeah.
It was fun, but a big learning experience for me.
Yes, yes. I see a
Seda?
hand. Is it
Yeah.
Shebnam?
Shebnam.
Yes.
Hi everyone, happy Friday.
Seda? Yeah.
So
Hi.
Oh,
this,
Shebnam, yeah.
this is Shebnam. I'm based in Berkeley, by the way. So I'm a public policy professional working in the field of sustainable transportation. So far, I have only worked for high-tech startups in the sustainable transportation space. And right now, I am working at the work as an advisory board member for 2 different high-tech startups in the transportation electrification space. So what I do, basically, as I told you earlier, I have experience in public policy and government relations, and this industry is heavily regulated. So you would need an expert like who will be responsible for tracking all the regulations and legislations in the United States. And I also have experience in grant writing, grant strategy, grant prospect research. So basically I help them with like build their presence here in the United States and be active in the public policy space. So yeah, basically I'm committing, let's say 4 or 5 hours per week. In return, they give me equity from the company. Yeah, this is all
Yeah,
about my
excellent.
experience. Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. So it's very much in parallel. I will move to the next type and we will stop and try to get, contributions. So that's advisory. So what I suggest, in your LinkedIn profile, of course, you will capture these details, to be more visible for future opportunities. If it's volunteer, then there is a section in the LinkedIn where you can write it in the volunteer section. But if you are getting something in return, then I think it can be added to the experience part. Sometimes my worry is if you have too many of these things, it clutters, the LinkedIn profile. So we have to be careful about where we put them because there is the regular experience, but if you have too many advisory boards, then it will really clutter. We have to watch out those nuances for our, social media presence. The next one is also a big one to start actually the board's journey, nonprofits, and especially in the US, as we know, they are very widespread. Governance is very strong, very tight. There are committee structures. So you learn a lot actually in terms of governance and also fundraising. I mean, this is most of the time related to your heart and passion and the organization's mission alignment. So you just join these type of organizations because you believe in the cause. There is no pay associated with it, but you're expected to actually support the mission with your donations, small or big. And also you help in different committees. If you come from finance, normally you would join a finance committee or audit committee. If you have some commercial or fundraising background, they will ask you to join such committees. But I believe this is a great way to get experience. There is definitely some pre-reads in these type of boards, not extensive as the public boards, but definitely there is some preparation needed. So again, I will stop sharing and ask if is anybody in the nonprofit boards today. Let's hear from one person at least to get a flavor.
I can talk
Okay.
to that. Hi everyone. I'm Seda.
Hi Seda. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm on an advisory board for a small tech company, but also on a nonprofit board, more related to my field, which is design, and it's called Design Forward Alliance, and it's actually we through that work we were able to bring World Design Capital nomination to San Diego Tijuana combined region this year. So it has been kind of this fascinating journey of really a working board, right? And I highly recommend being in a nonprofit board close to kind of your own industry. And it's one great way to network, but two, it's actually, if you're interested in community work or community-driven work and make an impact that way, it's very rewarding. So some interesting things about nonprofit boards. There's also, like, if you've mostly spent your life in for-profit world, it's a whole different mindset, unless the board is primarily have a for-profit background. If they don't, you have to learn to speak a different language of what matters to the nonprofit folks, and it's less related to what you would consider in the for-profit world of expansion, a revenue impact, and all of those things, but the currency is in a different, like measured in a different way. So you kind of have to kind of blend those two worlds together depending on the mission and the culture of the nonprofit board.
Thank you. Very helpful. Yes, it will be mainly impact reach, that they are looking at, and fundraising and how to use those funds. So we are moving now to the third category, which is the educational institutions and their boards. So again, based on my experience, it might be board of overseers, board of trustees, board of advisors. There are different names used in these institutions. I mean, I haven't seen pay associated with these roles, but it's more prestige, learning, experience, and also you are expected to donate or bring donors to a certain extent, like the nonprofits. You are expected to be an advocate for that institution. There is some pre-reading, some experiencing, their, of course, internal and external, let's say, presence. And there are some committee structures in a trustee role. I think out of these, definitely trustee role is critical because there is like investment funds being managed. So you are in charge, you are responsible, you have to make sure, the donations are invested properly and governed properly. Any of you in the school or educational institution boards? Again, maybe one person can jump in. Okay, maybe this is not as common, but that's also a very good way of starting this journey. They might approach you from your alma mater, or you might, find yourself adding value in a certain area, of your expertise. In my case, it was actually the human capital management. When I mean, I will talk about my journey, so I don't want to go there, but that's kind of the expertise that you bring will be their interests most of the time. Moving forward, the next category will be the most, I think, interesting one for I mean, like external world, but also yourselves, I'm sure. So the public boards, for-profit boards, of course, high governance, depending on where you are, significant reading, strategic governance role. There is a certain payment associated with it, externally, legally. You have obligations. If there are, I mean, if there is like a wrongdoing, you are definitely under those obligations. So therefore, there's a lot of governance reading, committee structures, committee leadership, and you have to keep yourself up to date about the ins and outs of the industry and trends. So there is some ongoing education there. Of course, I know that Ayşegül is involved in a couple of such boards, but I just want to also hear from anybody else. If not, I think Ayşegül can maybe come in and say a few words. Any public board members here? Ayşegül, you want to just give some flavor of those experiences you have?
Sure. I mean, the boards I'm on are not necessarily reflect, again, just like in the advisory board, my past experience. So I'm on a energy board as an example, but it's more the voice of the shareholder, and making sure that, number one, everything is done the proper way, the correct way, but also maybe looking at it at a much higher strategic level as to, are we 5 years down the road on the right path? Are we taking the structural, infrastructural, or organizational steps to get there? Rather than day to day, of course you're worried about, you got to make the quarter, you have to make the goals and everything of the company, but it's more strategic, high level, farther out. At least has been my experience, the role I think us, the independent board members, bring to the party.
So Ayşegül, maybe the satisfaction-wise, being in a public company board versus like you've been on advisory, can you maybe, like, and Imran, you two, like, talk about a little bit? I know also, I think in your career, maybe it's easier to get into advisory, but the satisfaction that you get from your contribution perspective. Do you see the difference in any of these boards between those boards?
You want to talk, Ayşegül, first?
Sure. It's very different. Like, all my life, I've been in the execution. I've been a CEO, I've been a general manager, what have you, and you hit the road and you have to deliver the numbers. Here, it is so different. You only monitor, you think, and then you talk. That's all you do. You don't do anything. And you cannot expect people to do anything either because they don't work for you. At a very high level, they do. So it's a very interesting dynamic to put yourself out of the equation and to be just an observer, an advisor, or somebody who oversees things has at first is difficult because you're like, okay, here's the obvious problem, we should go fix it. But then you got to pull yourself out and think much bigger and strategically to say, okay, well, this is happening because of that. So it's a very different hat is what I've seen. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, it's fun. I think it's enriching, particularly to be on sectors that I don't know anything about. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, moving from execution or operations to a board is a real mindset change, and you learn it in time because in the beginning you have the tendency of trying to be more involved and, doing things, etc. But in time, your place is not in execution, but it's more like selecting the CEO, assigning the CEO, making sure he has succession, making sure he is properly paid, with performance KPIs, and then you look at to the strategy, you look at the governance, and you make sure, risk management is in place. So those are the big picture things. But I just want to give an example from my current board, which is a UK public company in the food industry. And this week, actually, I had the board meetings, and the total number of pages we receive a week before is like 500 because there is the remuneration committee. There is I am in the remuneration committee, nomination committee, there is the board book, and then there is also a special project. So if you put it all together, you have to kind of read up to 500 pages. So I mean, let me join a public board is not something you would do like in addition to your busy day-to-day job. I think that's the reason most of the time we have seen retired people doing these things, like because they have more time in hand, they can really spend that time traveling, reading. We see more and more executives joining also, of course, such boards, but then a recommendation will be only one when you have a full-time job because more cannot be really handled properly. And after you leave your full-time job, you can take maybe 2, 3, up to 4 if you want to make it a career and if you want to get some earnings, and make sure you develop a new career in this field. So definitely there is satisfaction, but if you don't like reading, I mean, it's not a place for you. I mean, at least
I was
from
gonna
my,
say you gotta be low. You gotta be low in reading, huh? So.
I mean, US and UK, at least those boards, definitely there is a lot. Depending on the country, like Japan was not as much, but also you have to know how to read financial statements, how to read, balance sheet, cash flow, profit and loss statement. I mean, most of the pages will be about, financials. Of course, there is strategy, risk management, people. But if you don't have any background on finance, I mean, that will be tough. You need some education before because there are some very significant financial statements you have to understand. Okay, so let's move to the next one, which is again a for-profit organization, but they will be more in the privately owned system, which means they are not public. They don't have this quarterly results, announcements, pressures. I mean, from my knowledge, companies like you would know, Mars, Lego, um, they are very well-known companies, but they don't have this public status where they have to report quarterly. However, they will still have high governance, significant governance, and also there might be some family members involved. So you have to know how to manage those kind of relationships in these private boards. especially, I mean, like in Turkey, I'm sure it's even more. Like you will definitely have some family members. You have to know how to, work with them, etc. And there is a payment associated with these kind of organizations most of the time. And then the startup board, some of you might have again experience in this field already. It's similar to the advisory board, I think, but advisory board can be also in non-startup situations. So startups mainly try to get your expertise. We talked about it, some governance you can bring with your experience. It's very exciting, to be next to the entrepreneurs and get their energy, give your experience. So it's a great exchange, and you might get some equity in the midterm, and financially also have some gains. But it's more about the satisfaction of, I think, supporting them in the beginning and having that high energy. So let's hear if anybody involved in the startup world, either as a founder or as a board member. Okay, good. So let's move then. Will just quickly talk about my journey. So I mean, yes, I had 35 years of experience as mentioned by Aylin, and it was like, sorry, a long resume, despite I thought it was my shorter resume, but thank you very much for going through that. So I started being involved in boards in 2008 when I was in PepsiCo Frito-Lay Southeast Europe role as a president. We had a joint venture, and this was in actually I was in Turkey, but the joint venture was basically in Israel, Frito-Lay Strauss. And it was a private joint venture, so it was not a public company. Um, and my role as a board member there, because I was also the president of the region, I was not totally, independent. I was kind of managing the results, but also making sure I was adding value to the joint venture. So I felt myself from time to time, being too much into the managerial or operational aspects of the business, which is always, a interesting balance. So that was my learning out of that experience. When you are the president of a region, I think, of course, you have the operational, executional, responsibilities. But when you move to the boardroom, let the CEO of that joint venture and their team lead it, and you become more like the strategic, uh, guidance person. I think that was a learning. Then after that, in 2010 to 15, I became again a joint venture board member, Kalbi Snacks. At that time, I was in Hong Kong, and this was a joint venture of PepsiCo, but it was a public company after a year I joined. So it was in the Tokyo Stock Exchange. We went through all the, ins and outs of shareholder meetings. And then, also the frequency of these meetings, they were meeting every month, which is unusual for some other countries. Every country will have their own frequency, but Japan is one of the most demanding, I should say. So they meet every month. I was able to go in person sometimes, join on the phone sometimes, but everything was in Japanese. So I had a translator, and um, that was a very interesting experience. I was the only foreigner and the woman in the board. So a lot of learnings, which may not fit into this session, but we will have another one if you want. So that was a great experience. But after a while, we moved to Dubai, and I started joining these meetings in the morning at 4 a.m. And I was like, okay, I don't think this is sustainable. I should resign from this board. The chairman was very supportive, and he said, he will only accept my resignation if I actually bring in another woman director to replace me. He insisted, and he was really, a very experienced guy, but also very supportive of diversity agenda. So I still appreciate his commitment. So chairman, of course, is very important in terms of how they set the tone, the culture, diversity, and inclusion aspects. During also Hong Kong days, I joined the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology Business School Advisory Board. So I started my education institution experiences in those days. I mean, you build an incredible network. Of course, you add a lot of value with your business background, what kind of skills the students should have, what kind of education will be the best for them. So there's a lot you can offer. And also a lot of, committee work, day-to-day work, other than the big meetings. And after that, we moved to US. And at that point, I was invited into several nonprofits, the first one being Neighbors Link, which was about immigrants. So I stayed in Neighbors Link for 4 years as a board member, but I also joined in the development committee, finance committee, audit committee. So a lot of, again, preparation, reading, fundraising. So a great experience. You learn a lot. But what I did in 2021, when I joined actually the public board in UK, I said I have to drop one. When I add one, I should drop one because you can't continue adding. So you have to be careful with the number of boards. Another institution that I joined in 2017, Columbia University School of Professional Studies Board of Overseers. This is a lighter, actually, responsibility. You don't have a lot of meetings or, readings, but they need your, again, directional guidance on the curriculum, what is needed in the curriculum and the programs, Master of Science programs, these are, and my human capital, again, background was helpful there. Um, so it's more for actually your guidance and your you build network. That's the value of such a board. Continuing then the International Youth Foundation. It's a global board. I'm the co-vice chair, still continuing. It's about youth and life skills. And again, I have experience now as nomination and governance committee chair, and before that, development committee. 2018 Purchase College Foundation board trustee. So here we are managing about 88, 90 million dollars of donations. So as I said, it's very important, how you invest the money, how you govern the money and make sure that it is supporting the college's mission. You work with the college president. Um, and recently, as I said, the UK board, as well as the Mercy College Business School Advisory Board. So these are, I mean, like, this is my kind of journey. The last piece, some of the other advisory boards, but we have also a family foundation, and I'm the co-founder with my husband. Um, and here you learn to own everything from A to Z. So my nonprofit background really helped us to build this family foundation and run it. And it's very, I mean, like very connected. What you do in other boards, you can really connect it to your family foundation and create even more impact. And overall, I want to say that whatever you do, just follow your, I think, internal compass and just do what you love. I'm sure you will have a great impact on the communities. That's all from a presentation perspective, and we have still 10 minutes for any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, so Imran, maybe I mean, it's an amazing journey, right? You contributed so much into in different levels. So how did you find these positions? Like, I mean, I see that most of us on the call,
Yes.
We are in a certain level on their career, but I see some people they are at the more mid-level, senior. So where to start? Like, how did they come to you? Did you position yourself? How did you build your personal brand? So that would be super valuable to know. I will open up to questions. That's my question. So,
no, I think that's a very important question. So in those days, I think, I mean, if you go back a little bit, I was not using LinkedIn or anything that effectively. Now we use it more effectively. But in those days, it was more, first of all, of course, I was working in a big company like PepsiCo, and some of them were JVs, coming out of that system. So the Israel role, Japan role. I mean, because I was in PepsiCo, they were JVs, and I was in president positions, and that's the way it came. So it might be possible for some of you where, if you work in a company, they might have some operations where you will be asked to serve. So if you put that aside, I think then Universities normally, you know, they call you to speak on a topic, and then you go and speak, and then they say, wow, this person might add value to my mission. You know, then they start considering inviting you for the mission. So what I would say, I mean, be open to such calls, especially in terms of sharing your experience. Like we are doing today, you know, share your experience, find an audience, and you will start creating a network who will be interested in your voice and experience. I think that's important. Today, we can also use LinkedIn very effectively to build our CVs in such a way that, you know, what are your key expertise areas? In the boards today, finance is always a very critical area. So if you have finance background, definitely they're always looking for example, audit committee chairs, audit committee members. I mean, that's a hot topic. CEOs, presidents, general managers, of course, will be always needed. But also now more and more we see legal people, HR people, diversity topics, but also technology. I mean, some of you here, or most of you here actually, you are very rich in terms of your digital technology backgrounds, and more, some more established companies need that expertise. And it doesn't have to be like 30 years of experience. I mean, if you are 15 years experienced in the tech sector, you will be a good asset, most probably, for a very established company. So how do you voice those, I think, experiences in your LinkedIn profile? You can find resources to upgrade, use the keywords, and make sure if there is a search, you are visible. So, I mean, the way these things come to you happens from the networks most of the time, you know, people who know you. As I said, you know, speaking opportunities in some industry forums where you are experienced, I think will be good. And using your profile effectively on LinkedIn and the other, you know, related kind of platforms. I mean, those are the three things I would say.
And if you have any questions on the audience, please, you know, raise your hand. We are going to unmute you and relate it to this or any other questions you might have.
I mean, what I suggest, I mean, you should really starting early is good. So start early, start in nonprofit advisory, whatever it is, and build that governance experience. I think that's critical. Then you will have something to write about it and something to talk about it. Then the rest will come. But I mean, in the beginning, you shouldn't say, oh, this is very small. I mean, for example, my first nonprofit experience was about $2.5 million kind of a size of an organization. I mean, it's not very big, but they had the full governance of everything. So you learn a lot.
Yeah. So do you see, I mean, we are talking about the diversity, of course, as a Turkish American woman, like we kind of represent, you know, different culture or even religion and age, you know, we are, of course, offering, especially like being Turkish. So do you see something unique, like we should do special to position ourselves or not necessarily?
I mean, I think understanding different cultures in this era is already an important start, you know, especially if you were born in the US, you educated in the US, you are seen as an American. But if you kept your roots, the language, the culture, I think it's an additional dimension. Myself, you know, I came here only like 6 years ago, so I'm not like American Turkish. I am more Turkish, I should say. But I spent so many years in different places, so that global experience for me or for the groups, they were interested in my global background. So if you have the American, the Turkish, but also other global experiences in your jobs today, I think that's very important because everybody wants to go to other countries, international markets. That will be an asset. As I said, digital technology, automation, AI, those experiences are very well also received. And more diversity is also requested in the boards with different ways of thinking, design thinking, or understanding different ways of approaching problems. So it doesn't have to be only the gender, the color, but also you might bring something to the board which is very different.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question.
Right.
You might have kind of just referred to this, but what advice you would have for people who are very early in their career, and if you would say it's more typical to like for your first board to be a nonprofit or something else?
I think that's the easier way to start. I mean, first of all, you have some kind of a passion. Uh, it might be your college, university, uh, the community, school, whatever. But I think starting in nonprofit, even as a volunteer, and then moving into administrative or board roles, will be the easy route. And then I think also as I said, in LinkedIn, after you build some experience, there is a button called Open To, where you can also express your interest, I think, in what you want to do. You want to be like an advisor on certain topics, let's say, you might express that. But of course, it needs some experience building. If you look at the average age of boards, we see definitely it is coming down. Still, of course, you have a lot of, depending on the country, 60s, 70s kind of age groups, but we see also a lot of 40, 45s coming into the boards, or even in some industries, it can be 30, 35. So I think it's not like before that you need all these 30, 35 years of experience. So there are industries where, um, 10 years, 15 years experience will be good enough. Before that, I would say it's education institutions, it's nonprofit, those kind of volunteers, start as a volunteer and move to the more governance roles.
Mhm. And we talked about these different boards, right? So it's, as far as how many people are in the board, is it pretty much the same numbers? So it varies, like
Varies.
certain boards are varies. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, nonprofits look for more people 2025 because they board member means also source of funding, fundraising, donation. So they will be happy to have 20, 25 people in their boards. For public boards, depending on the country, I would say, and depending on the independent status, it can be 10, 12. If it is family, private, they might also survive with 6, 7. I think they don't need to be very big. I mean, Ayşegül, I think you are in some of the Turkish public boards or family boards. What is your observation on the numbers?
The total number, as you rightfully said, ranges between 7 to 12 is what I've seen. But the total of independent board members is kind of where the company is in the journey of, if they want to be really professional, they want to have at least 50% of the board with outsiders than the family. And if they're still at the early stages, it's just a couple of independent board members. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I didn't mention about education. If you want to get ready for such a journey, there are so many good resources. I mean, some resources are, I think, free. But recently, even myself, with all this experience, I became a member of, North America Corporate Directors Organization. They have a membership, but also a certification. So in time, I think you might build some certifications based on the countries, like UK is different, US is different. I mean, there are commonalities, but for UK, for example, Financial Times program for board membership or board leadership, I think is a good one. If you want to pay and get certified, etc. I think on the Bay Area, I remember I heard that Stanford has a good program. So there might be a time in your life and career you may want to say, okay, let me take also some education on this front, study online or in person. I mean, some of them are only like a week program. You go and, learn something and come out, but some are more like online. You can do it on your own. And there are many free resources also to read. About governance and some of the responsibilities of board members. So education is also a good way to start. What does it mean to be in a board? Educate yourself early on.
And also, I mean, like you mentioned, I guess, being a member or certain associations. I know Ayşegül
Yes.
herself have been a member in many well-known associations, and same thing for you, Imran. I think that's one way of, I guess, to be out there and get recognized
Yes.
and
Building.
building that brand, right? Yeah.
Building the network, I think, yeah. I mean, I think having a lot of people in your network is not as good as having a focused network, because some are going to help your current career, some will help your future journey, some will help your maybe the nonprofit side. So you can be more focused and selective on building relationships, but also conferences, as you say, forums, especially when it was in person. Of course, it was much more effective, I should say, going there, spending 2 3 days. But I mean, when we are back again in person, some critical conferences will be also good for networking. Yes, no, I think
Yeah.
this was a
All
good
right.
conversation. I hope it was helpful for the participants.
Oh,
And yeah,
thank you so much. This was super, super helpful for me. I am also new to that, even though I'm in a certain level in my career. I've been, looking into it and how, get that place in the room. I wanted to thank you for all the people attended and shared their perspective. Thank you so much. And we wanted to see you again and another TUSIAD event. And thank you, Imran Beba.
thank you.
It
Thank you.
was great. Thank you.
Have a
Imran,
great weekend.
thank you for the inspiration. This was very valuable.
Yeah.
And Aylin, appreciate it for hosting this. Excellent. And thanks a lot, Eldon, for helping us. I'm going to invite all of you on the bridge one more time to be a member of our LinkedIn and come and join. We always need volunteers who want to support us for the efforts here. Thank you so much, all of you.